we have got another excellent talk coming up by Serena Gasparini. And very quickly, Serena hails from Radelaide, okay? I know that everybody that knows about Adelaide knows it's Radelaide, actually, Australia, and is the founder of Sense&Forum. Serena's like, yes, you know what I'm talking about, where they work with human-centric brands in their communities, especially ones focused on bettering the lives of minority groups, women, and people who identify as women. So, Serena, you're a self-professed marketing geek turned creative business owner. I love it. Human mom to Mateo, fur mom to Douglas and Mila. And you are here brought to us by Better Mode. Sponsoring this talk is creating safe, diverse, inclusive, and accessible communities. And with that, please take it away.
Thank you so much for having me here. This is an incredible opportunity, and I'm so glad to be able to talk about this topic that means so much to me. I'm surprised you knew a lot about Radelaide. That's amazing. And it also looks like Eric and I have a uniform going on today. So thanks for anyone else talking today. Get the memo. I'm going to jump in and start talking about the topic. Welcome everyone to this presentation on creating safe, diverse, and inclusive and accessible communities. A little bit of a mouthful, but it's worth it. I'm excited to have you here today as we explore essential aspects of building communities that welcome and support individuals from all walks of life. As individuals, we all long for that sense of belonging, don't we? Unfortunately, not all communities are created equal. Some fail to provide a seat at the table for everyone, leaving people feeling excluded or unheard. And I believe that is why you are here today, to learn how you can create that sense of belonging in your communities. But before we jump into the details, I'd like to share a little bit about myself. Apart from that amazing intro, why am I here and why am I talking about creating communities that are safe, diverse, inclusive, and accessible? Because as a woman, someone who has had mental ill health in the past and chronic illness, has had to navigate dyslexia as a child, I always struggled to find that sense of belonging in spaces I was navigating. And when one person does the work in this space, they teach 2 more people, you guys watching, and then they go on to teach others. And then we have more conscious minds working towards creating communities for the greater good. When the word community comes up for brands and businesses, they often talk about how to build them, how to create content, increase engagement, and how to grow communities, which is great and obviously a necessity. But we can't do all of this if we don't have a sense of belonging. And if it's not at the core purpose, then we're not creating safe communities. So I'm making it my work within my business to build these strong foundations in the communities that I work in, and I hope that you will too after this presentation. Adding another layer of building safe, diverse, inclusive, and accessible communities might sound complicated and a lot to digest, but most things that are challenging the norm are. So for today, let's call it SDINA, and I will show you how you can make this a normal part of your community management practice and how you can remove the unconscious bias and start nurturing communities with this in mind. So what will we talk about today? We'll cover a sense of belonging. We'll walk through what is safe, diverse, inclusive, and accessible, and what it looks like in communities. We'll navigate the 4 pillars of inclusive communities and how you can break down unconscious bias as a community manager. Practical steps for creating safe spaces. This is exactly how it sounds on the packet. So let's jump in. A sense of belonging. Creating safe, diverse, and inclusive and accessible spaces that supports all members regardless of their race, gender, sexuality, or abilities is at the heart of the strategies that I build for my clients, working to support businesses and brands in the understanding their unconscious bias and how they can put themselves in the shoes of their community members. This is what we'll work through, but before we jump into all the details, I want to do a little exercise with you. So please close your eyes and take a seat in the hot seat. I've called it this because this is how a lot of people feel when they walk and enter into a space they may feel uncomfortable or unfamiliar with. It can bring up a lot of anxieties and quite often hot sweats. Can anyone else relate to this? Please give a little thumbs up below. Now, are your eyes closed? I hope so. Imagine walking into a room, a place, or an event that you've never been before, a room full of people you've never met. You feel nervous or out of place, a little like me right now. Take some time now to think. Reflect what triggered this feeling. Consider what could have made you more comfortable before entering the room or the space. Think about the actions others in the room could have taken to help you feel like you belonged. I'm going to give you a little minute to think about that and add your answers in the comments on the side. Now, while you're thinking about this situation and putting yourself in this situation, let's recognize that this happens to a lot of people all of the time when joining a community. There's a particular example when people are asked to introduce themselves. Community managers are asking members to walk into a space and reveal themselves without any warmth or encouragement. Not always, but sometimes often. So how do we make these people feel safe and like they've entered a space full of their biggest fans? Well, let's get to that a little later, but first let's uncover the individual bits: safe, diverse, inclusive, and accessible, and what they look like in communities. A safe community ensures that an individual's physical and emotional well-being is prioritized. When safe spaces are offered, people feel like they're going to be looked after and protected through the support of the community manager, moderators, and the guidelines set in place. A diverse community ensures it represents a range of backgrounds, experiences, and identities, including neurodivergent people, people with disabilities, chronic illnesses, gender, mental ill health, the LGBTQIA+, so 2S+, the BIPOC community, and different cultural and ethnic backgrounds. This can be thought of this can be through its members, the content, images, stating your pronouns, or having a diverse range of speakers and presenters for your events. You want your members to be able to see themselves. If they can't, they won't feel comfortable in your community or safe or feel like they can speak. An inclusive community promotes equal access to resources and opportunities for all individuals, regardless of their identity and background. And lastly, accessible, a community that provides accommodations to support individuals with accessibility needs to ensure that they can participate fully in community events and activities. Not sure how to cater and provide these accommodations? Just ask them. This leads me to my next section. The 4 pillars of inclusive communities. We have ask, listen, learn, educate, and advocate. Ask is to uncover the needs of the community through generating feedback and asking questions, creating spaces for members to share feedback, or by requesting their accessibility needs will help you create a more welcoming and safe environment. Sometimes we don't need to throw tons of content at our community members. All we need to do is post some questions to start a conversation and have an open door policy as the community manager to encourage feedback and the openness to talk. Sometimes having an open channel directly to the community manager makes people feel a lot more comfortable. This leads us to listen. Listen and engage in active listening in order to learn from the community. Then learn. Embrace the openness to learn from your community. The community can teach you a lot, from how to support them better to finding out what services or products to offer them, as well as learning what content they may want to consume and how they want to consume it. Once you have asked, listen, and learn, it's time to advocate and educate. It's important to nurture the environment. As a community manager, it's your responsibility to do the work, advocate, and share resources to educate the rest of the community. So ask the questions, listen, learn, educate, and advocate. Now you're ready for the practical steps. Am I right? These practical steps will help you ensure that your community is safe, diverse, and inclusive, and accessible. Here are some examples that I have used in the communities that I have run previously. First is setting a clear set of community guidelines and values. These will show up as soon as someone enters the community. Have a community diversity and inclusion policy and make sure all people, including moderators and people who work in your community, are familiar with this. Create safe spaces, including subgroup channels, feedback channels, and an open door policy. I have an example of this on the next page, which I can show you. Celebrate diversity through events, content, and activities. Audit your content and imagery. to ensure that there's representation of minority groups and different cultures, but make sure this is a true reflection of your community. It's so often that people have these images that are stock images as not a representation of their community at all. And ensure that you provide accommodations and ensure accessibility for individuals with disabilities so they can be encouraged to participate. This could be from having a quiet space at events or a breakout room on online workshops for people who don't wish to participate. It's so often with the neurodivergent community that they're forced into situations where they don't feel comfortable. Going back to my example earlier. So it's important that we're creating these spaces that people, if they need a break, if they need time out, or if they don't wish to participate, they feel welcome in doing so and having their own space to chill out for a moment. It's also important in communities that we highlight and normalize the use of pronouns and learn the correct terms for minority groups and various ethnicities. And lastly, provide content in different accessible formats, including written, video with subtitles, and podcast styles. And here are some examples that I put together and have used in the communities that I've run before. As you can see here, using the use of pronouns, this one here I really like is use of the disability sunflower. So if you have neurodiversity or if you're disabled in some way, you can put the sunflower here to identify that this is something that is about you. Here in a community around, we created other spaces for people who are mums or expecting babies and run their business, or who are neurodiverse, so that when they're ready to, when they want to talk about certain things that relate to them, they can and feel safe talking about them in their own individual spaces. We also have this where you can ask this question, and it's as simple as this: what are your accessibility needs? Ask this question when running your events. And then lastly, guidelines. Having these set of guidelines, including be kind and curious and no hate speech or bullying, will make your community feel very safe and welcoming. Thank you all for joining me today, and remember, we're all in this together. And by creating more safe, diverse, inclusive, and accessible communities, we can make a difference. Stay inclusive, stay safe, and keep building those welcoming communities. And if you want to learn more about creating a sense of belonging, feel free to reach out and we can chat. And I believe my good friend, fellow community member, and co-worker is on next, Jazz. I'm really excited to hear her speak to.
When you take a look at the chat, you'll see how impactful it was. So we do have a question, and maybe you could take a minute or two to share with us your thoughts. But do you have any strategies for creating neuro-inclusive communities? And also, maybe what do you do for yourself?
Yeah. So one of the examples I shared, and this came up in a community that I run, Found and Flourish, and we noticed that there was a lot of neurodiverse people in the community, but there wasn't a space for them to talk. So what we do is we create those safe channels, and they can have that space to be able to discuss what they need, what it is about business that impacts them rather than the norm, and then how they can create strategies to support each other. And that's the discussions that happen in those spaces.
Fantastic. Thank you. And are there any events or highlighted moments that are specific to these groups of people? If you do it in that way.
Yes. So I was recently last year, actually, this time last year, I was at a month-long exchange fellowship, and this is where the conversation came up for people to have more safe spaces while they're at these events, while they are attending. And it didn't happen at this event, but through these conversations, it made me realize that having these spaces, a breakout room, a green room for neurodiverse to break into, is really important. Other things that can be done is just, asking that question: are there any accessibility needs as a community, if you're a community manager or event manager, so that you're aware when you're hosting an event that these things are gonna people are gonna need certain support. And so I would recommend, by taking this into account, that flashing imagery, loud noises, what you wear, are all like covered, and making sure that when people are going to be entering the room, that they're not going to be bombarded and overwhelmed, and you're creating that kind of nice space for them to feel welcome as well.
Absolutely, thank you. And just a final one before we wrap up here for real is, and I'm sorry if you mentioned this earlier, but in terms of collection of feedback, with this in specificity around accessibility, around neurodivergence, how do you collect that feedback? How often? And then how do you really work on making those changes?
Sure. So always I recommend community managers or community owners create quarterly or even bi-monthly feedback forms and have questions in there. This is how we discovered in the community we were running that we needed a channel for individual groups to be able to have these conversations. So it's really important to, share that olive branch and to be making sure that those questions are available in the feedback form, not just do you have any other comments, because that's not going to create conversation. Also, as a community manager, having that open door policy so people can access you. Okay, you don't want them accessing you 24/7, but so your door is open, and if they're struggling or have had an impact by someone not abiding by the guidelines, you're there and you can make change quickly, because change in this space can't wait, a couple of hours, it can't wait the next day. Anything that happens needs to kind of be jumped on immediately and resolved within minutes.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. It has to be immediate. You're right, because we're dealing with the states of being of people. So that can't wait a little while. So thank you for that. Also, thank you for hashtag boundaries. Community leaders everywhere, take that to the bank. Have a boundary for the love of God. Okay.
Yeah.
With that, thank you so much, Serena, for your time, your energy, what you've shared. You've got the chat popping, so make sure to pop in there and respond to people. And thank you so much. Can't wait to see you in the
Yeah.
interwaves.
Thank you very much. It was lovely.